right, now that the wife is out of the house, I've got a few moments to talk to you confidentially about all the material I collected over the last 10 years in researching and writing the Wizard Clip haunting. Of course, I collected probably 1,000 documents electronically as people sent them to me or as I found them on the internet. And this came from the archives. It says the Associated Archives at St. Mary's Seminary University in Baltimore, Maryland. So this is the main seminary in the United States for Catholic history, at least early American Catholic history, where John Carroll was bishop and all that. And so this is the collection of scans, of which I'm not going to show you because this is too many, but I have some printouts of a few things I'll show you. This is the yearbook from 2008 for St. Agnes Church in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And Shepherdstown, if you remember, or if you've read part of the Wizard Clip, you know is where Father Dennis Cahill was cloistered by John Carroll when he got in trouble with the bishop. And it talks a little bit about Father Dennis Cahill of Hagerstown celebrated Mass in this little church on the chapel lot at the west end of town. This apparently took place on 1.5 acres, which Abraham Shepherd had recently deeded to Clement Pierce and Joseph Clark as trustees of the Roman Church and burying ground there in Shepherdstown. So I got a history of that in a little yearbook from Shepherdstown. One of the things that I did to keep the dates straight is that I went on the internet and I printed out calendars for all of the years that the story took place. This is the culmination of the story occurs in 1797, and this is the calendar for that date, and you see a lot of marks on there. The nice thing about this is this kept the dates and the days of the week straight that you'll see throughout the novel, and it also articulates which day of the month was the new moon, a crescent moon, a half moon, or the new moon, which, if you've read the book, you know is kind of a significant part of the story. So I was constantly referring to this, making sure that what I was talking about was accurate. I found a lot of historical maps of every place from New Orleans to Baltimore to West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, not West Virginia, I'm sorry, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and ended up creating, even with the help of Google Maps, a lot of the journeys that Adam Livingston and Dennis Cahill take, and trying to make sure that the places they stop and where they experience different events accurately could have occurred in that time frame and on that path. And of course, make sure that they cross creeks and rivers where they in fact occur. So that took a bit of time. And there's Hall's Ferry, which also plays into the story. When I was at the Baltimore Archives, I was able to find scans of the actual letters that Dennis Cahill wrote to Bishop Carroll and those that Bishop Carroll wrote back to him. Some were transcribed, but some that I had to transcribe from the actual manuscript. So this is a particular letter that Dennis Cahill wrote on August 27th in 1795 to the bishop, and then, of course, the bishop's replies I have otherwise in print and also in some transcripts. This is the actual deed, or at least not, well, the deed here. Got kind of scans of the actual deed that when Adam Livingston donated the 35 acres to the Catholic Church for the keeping of a priest. That's the actual scan of the actual deed, which is really hard to read, but someone had transcribed it for me, so I have actually the text of the deed here. That doesn't really play into the story too much, except that just confirms that, in fact, it did occur. This was in the actual date for this occurrence was in the early 1800s, like 1803. But then even after that, it was like 100 years in the courts because of what I claim is the curse of the land because of what happened in 1760, and that's how the book starts. But it took like 100 years for that to get out of the courts. for Priestfield to actually be established as a pastoral retreat center for the church. And then, of course, you have, I found all kinds of interesting letters that were written by various people that were published in newspapers at the time. This is the transcript that I got from the archives of a letter exchange between priest Lawrence Sylvester Filon, who at the time that this letter was written in, see if I have the date on here, 1798. He was the priest at Hagerstown after Dennis Cahill was removed from Hagerstown by Bishop Carroll, and is an exchange that appeared in the Potomac Guardian, the newspaper. And the spelling, of course, is interesting. It's not like the Potomac River that we know of today, but it's Potomak, Potomac Guardian. Anyhow, this is the exchange of the letters between that priest in Hagerstown and Adam Livingston's wife, Mary Ann, who disputes Father Filon's account of his visit to their farm. And so that's in the book, of course, because it's a real one. If you notice that in the book, there are asterisks throughout the narrative, and the asterisks are supposed to indicate that the writer had some documentation to establish that the event that follows the asterisks actually is documented in history and not out of my imagination. From the West Virginia Division of Culture and History, Kathy Miller sent me just reams of newspaper articles about the Wizard Clip. Some are very hard to read, as you see. This is a newspaper column down the side there. But others that she sent were quite readable. And she sent me these nice legal-size photostats of all these articles over time in history of the various stories involving the Wizard Clip and the history. And of course, these are written at various times in history. They don't go all the way back, but they're the recounting of the Wizard Clip story by contemporaries mostly. But anyhow, little by little, you get all these different stories. They're all a little different. I think I say in my afterword that I probably got 30 different versions of the Wizard Clip story from documented history, and they're all a little different. I think there's actually a lot more versions of the story than 30. I was being conservative in using that number. If you count up what I have just shown you here today, I've got at least 30 right here in front of me. And I've got many more in electronic and digital form. Then there's some of the more, I know, here, I guess what I should show you here is that this is the paper file of the various stories and accounts and things that I've collected over time. And so this is why I say I probably got way more than 30 versions of that story. And then some of the actual publications that I've been able to collect. One of the best known is this little book here that I think I picked this up at Priestfield. This is Adam Livingston and the Wizard Clip and the Voice by Anna Marshall. And it is probably the best cited document as she tells the story. And this was, I think, published not too long ago. Let's see, yes, 1978. But what was interesting, before I got this book, which is the published version of the story by Anna Marshall, someone, and I don't know who gave this to me, someone gave me the unedited original version of Anna Marshall's manuscript. And so here, if you read through this, you see all the stuff that's highlighted, but also like here on the first page, you'll see a bunch of stuff struck out and annotated. And so I was able to go through this document and kind of read between the lines, literally, of the story. And then, of course, later on, read the final published version of that. So this is a real nice thing. I don't know who gave this to me. Probably one of the historians from Pennsylvania or Maryland. And then this is something I had recently, after I started writing the book, I came across this book. This is The Mystery of the Wizard Clip, Supernatural Visitations in Old Virginia and Their Remarkable Legacy. There, I guess I should hold it up like that, by Raphael Brown and the Reverend Monsignor John L. O'Reilly. So it's a nice little 90-page book with a lot of nice, and the nice thing about a lot of these books is that they have indexes and bibliographies at the back, so you can trace back and find things. And of course, this is a lot about Priestfield. They have a big section here on Priestfield leading up to that. Just fascinating stuff, and a lot of stuff about Gallitzin in here. And so this is a real nice book too. And then of course, I have a collection of old books, ancient books. And so I kind of like to get on the internet and search things out. And this one, I was really just tickled to get. This is an original edition of Gallitzin's letters. Well, original edition, that's probably overstated. This was published by the Angel Mode Press from Loretto, Pennsylvania. Of course, Loretto is the town that Gallitzin founded in Pennsylvania up in the mountains. The date on this is 1940. So these are his letters, which he dedicates to his mother, by the way. And this may have been the first time they were collected into a single volume. But anyhow, this is just really a great reference, because in this book, he's mostly defending Catholicism, because he was quite a writer and a defender of Catholicism against his Protestant friends. And so here, I'll just read you a few sentences from a letter to a Protestant friend. And he says, quote, "I am acquainted with a very respectable man," he's referring to Adam Livingston, "formerly a Protestant, whom this acknowledged want of power in his minister caused to forsake the pretended Reformation with his whole family to embrace the Catholic faith. For a considerable length of time he was persecuted and his property destroyed by the agency of evil spirits. The clothes belonging to him and his family were seen by invisible hands, a cutting to pieces. Stones were seen moving across the room held by invisible hands. Fire bursted repeatedly from out of their beds in broad daylight. Strange and frightful apparitions and strange noises terrified them very often at night." So anyhow, he goes on, but that's obviously part of the Adam Livingston story by a firsthand account in a letter. And then in visiting some of the churches that Dennis Cahill helped found, this is a history that I collected when I visited St. Mary's in Hagerstown. And of course, in here, there is a picture of the original Hagerstown chapel, supposedly, that Dennis Cahill built. All kinds of references to Gallitzin, Dennis Cahill, and how he sprinkled the Livingston home with water, and then came back and with Gallitzin helped to exercise the house. Anyhow, a bunch of information. It differs from other accounts, but nonetheless it's there. And there's also a story of the Conwego Chapel, from where Gallitzin and others came to celebrate Mass in Hagerstown out of Conwego, because there were a number of priests there that were missionary priests. Also, this is also the St. Mary, this is their Millennium edition of history. And of course, here we have even more accounts of priests in Conwego. And this appears to be, this account says that Dennis Cahill actually erected the first physical church that was actually built as a church. And this is a drawing. St. Mary's Church is believed to have looked like this when completed in 1827. So that was well after Dennis Cahill was there. But Dennis Cahill started that church. Well, he didn't start the Catholic Society there, although I kind of suggest that in the book. But he was instrumental in getting the church going. It says here that it was also known that Father Dennis Cahill was in charge of the Hagerstown Mission from 1790 to 1806, and he was the builder of the first place of worship and the first resident pastor, according to Shea's History of the Catholic Church in the United States. So that helped, that information. And probably the most comprehensive history of the Wizard Clip that I came across was a monograph by Reverend Joseph Fenotti, Society of Jesus. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this monograph was given to me by John Eric Gillou, who's the archivist at the Diocese of West Virginia. John was very helpful. John Eric was very helpful. And as you see, it's a copy, it's a photostat of the book. All kinds of good references. And I referenced this monograph in my afterword, suggesting that even Joseph Fenotti, and this was in 1879, about 100 years after the events that he compiled these, he had written to all sorts of people that knew of the events or who had first or second, well, not firsthand evidence of it, experience with it, but second and third hand, and got their replies. He doesn't come to any conclusions. He simply documents and reproduces all the letters and information that he got, and essentially says, who knows what really happened, because we have all these different variations of the story. And then later on, after I had read and studied that, I actually found this online, which is exactly the same book, page for page. Someone's photostated and copied it. Well, actually, not someone. Creative Media IO says, whoever that is. Anyhow, this is a nice little version that's available through Amazon. I think I got this through Amazon. And it's called The Mystery of the Wizard Clip, a monograph by Joseph Fenotti. So you can buy this if you want and get it online. Well, anyhow, that's been the excitement of writing historical fiction, is the years of research and discovery. And as you discover these things, you create, you don't create the plot. Well, I guess you do create it, but you discover the potential and the opportunities for plot points and pinch points and points of view and things like that. And it really makes the whole story come alive for the author. So thanks a lot for listening. Hope you enjoy the book.